savings time.
So we just switched back to like an hour.
Oh, you do it. Okay. Hawaii doesn't do daylight savings time, so. And plus, all the numbers in my head just kind of like time zones, bro. Time zones. Well, yeah, I think we're 2 hours. It's 12 o'clock your time, right?
Yeah.
So now we're 2 hours apart, whereas we were 3 hours before. I'm gonna get my headset for this one. So everybody, welcome Prana to the stage. We are going to be asking and answering some questions. So feel free to fire them off in the chat. Or if there's any topics that you'd like for us to discuss, that you're very welcome to do that as well.
And we will just riff on it. Give us an update, Prana. How's life?
Oh, it's good. With the time change on the weekend, I used to hate it. And I found it was probably one of the most relaxing days I've had with my family. Like, we didn't have much to do, and we didn't have to be out anywhere, so it felt like just a really long, relaxing day. I mean, I don't know if anyone else felt that way, but it felt like, once we were done breakfast, there's still so much of the day left. Yeah, it just felt like.
That's awesome, man. I had a similar experience with my family of like, wow, we're not really like doing anything today. It's kind of mellow. And yeah, I kind of attribute it to because the transit shifted around that time as well, which I thought was really cool. And yeah,
isn't it cool that the just checking in? Can you guys hear me?
it was kind of coming in and out, like high volume and then low volume. Maybe because you're using your AirPods.
Yeah.
I mean, it's coming in okay. It's not ideal, but how am I coming through?
You're crystal clear.
Cool.
I'll try it a bit longer. If people don't like it, I'll take it out.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see if it flows.
I was saying, isn't it cool? Just another evidence that the gates of the G center divide the seasons up.
No way.
So like the winter solstice, the summer solstice are all around like the sun going into gate 10, 25, or 15, the Earth in 15. So if you look at the zodiac, the G center gates divide the wheel up perfectly into these both quarters and eighths, right? So every quarter starts with G center gates, and halfway through that quarter, there's another G center gate. So it's a neat thing that when we decide to do this daylight savings switch here, it's G center gate 1. But that the summer and winter solstice and the fall equinox fall in the 10, the 2, the 46, and the 25.
Man, that is so interesting. Wow. I'm wondering like how much of this stuff, because naturally, right, like when Ra channels this stuff, it's like he doesn't necessarily know the exact application of it and how many of those like, oh yeah, it does that too. And Ra's just sitting back like, dang, this is crazy.
Yeah, it's like the more you figure out, the more you realize there's so much coinciding that it can't make it up.
Right. Yeah, it's like literally cannot make it up. Cannot make it any better. But I love that concept that the seasons are broken up and transitioned through the G center, because in terms of love and direction, right? Like I have a very different sense of direction in the winter time as opposed to the summertime. And so it's a good time for individually and collectively to evaluate the direction and where we're sourcing that sense of significance from. And G transits are so perfect for doing that. Like I just destroyed my hut that I'm usually in. Now I'm on the porch, right? And I'm really loving it. Like I'm enjoying being so close to the family, but still able to have like close a curtain, and like I can hear Aurora screaming a lot clearer now. And so it's very different, very contrast. And so naturally I'm hyper aware of it because of the G transits, and also because I know my open G, or my undefined G is the way that it is. I'm like, well, this is going to be different next week, so don't trip over any of the things that I could trip on, because I know the Legos are all over the floor. So just kind of like walk. Like I literally she's got like some toys and stuff on the floor out there too. So it's bittersweet.
It adds a little bit to your authenticity to hear the sounds of your environment, right? The chickens in the background.
Exactly. And that's something that was really important to me because I make music as well. And you want a sound tight environment when you're making music, because you just want to capture that, but realizing like, okay, I don't have a, $2 million studio with an airtight room and all this stuff. I'm in the jungle with some wireless microphones, and like, that's you, Marco, like at least you right now. So like roll with that. The G brings a lot of these opportunities to accept myself that I'm super grateful for. So let's see. I'd love you both could discuss boundaries for a reflector in group situations, particularly if you want to tune into one person. That's a really good question, Mac. That's a really good question. Prana, do you have anything on that? And then I'll piggyback off whatever you have to say.
Boundaries. I mean, reflectors are here to really, gauge the environment and to be gauge for the health of the environment and the community of that environment. And what reflectors are really here to see is what's different. So many people are just the same, right? Homogenized, and behaviors, the same interactions. And so what reflectors are looking for, either whether they know it or not, is the people and the things that really stand out are different, are worthy of notice. That's the signature of surprise, right? To feel that surprise when you cross something different, same as everything else. So how that applies to, wanting to tune into one person, right? Finding those people that are different, right? That stand out to you, that deserve attention, and the boundaries part, understanding that you're really here to be a gauge. You reflecting so much of what other people are giving off, can lead to a lot of amplification and distortion. But you can rest knowing who you are and where you are in your cycle of your phases. Yeah, I don't know if that brings up anything for you. I'm not sure where to go with that in particular, but
yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of experience with this, honestly, like wanting to connect with like that person, but then like being the reflector and spending the entire time like bouncing around like a butterfly, or like finding how you say, little caves of sanctity, and like discharging the energy. And one of the things that I came to realize is that, connecting with an individual for a reflector is not the same as it would be for a generator or even a projector to be like right up with them, experiencing them, because so much of our experiences is built off of these samples. One of the things that's really interesting to bring into the realm of connecting with an individual is witnessing how they connect with other people and who they choose to connect with. And so kind of like creepily just like watching them, tuning into that person, with the simple act of awareness. And what really I think gets in the way of that is this like fear of missing out. Like, oh, I really want this person to have a connection with me, as opposed to I really want to connect and witness this person. And so that's just kind of like an add-on to the context of the question. And in regarding to boundaries, like I have this uh, distinction between boundaries and standards. And I think a lot of people use boundaries, but they're really talking about standards. And so the difference is the boundary is like you enforcing a standard. The standard, this example of, hey, take your shoes off when you come into my house. That's the standard. Everyone does that. If someone comes into my house with shoes on, I have to enforce a boundary. Hey, point to the standard. There's a sign that says take your shoes off. Would you mind taking your shoes off? Oh yeah, totally, of course. Most of the time people respect the standard and they only have to be reminded once or twice. But when people have to be reminded 7, 8, 9, 10 times, they are either your standard is not really clear, or your standard is not actually your standard, right? It's actually lower than what you tell people it is. But erecting boundaries is exhausting. And so what I'm considering as well is because, again, there is a says or a boundary rather than the standard, right? And so in terms of like wanting to connect with someone in a traditional sense, one of the biggest things, one of the tools for me has been to make myself available for connection and kind of letting them come to me. So the standard for who I'm willing to connect with goes up immensely, right? So if someone comes up to me and they just start talking to me about some party or something like that, I'm not necessarily rude, but I'm not accommodating to that. I'm not opening up my field to somebody that I don't really want to connect with. I'm staying pretty closed and tight. I'm posturing up in ways where I'm not facing them directly. And in Maui, there's a lot of like spiritual people that like want to come up and like hug you for 13 and a half minutes and like tell you about all the projects that they're going through. And this is my experience. And so one of the ways that I've mitigated that, especially as a reflector and as someone who's kind of like pretty well respected in the community in terms of having information about human design, always people are coming up asking me about human design and stuff like that. And I've had people come up to me and ask me questions, and then they ask, is this okay that I'm asking all these questions? And I say something along the lines of, well, I'm a little bit closed off to going too deep into that, but if you want to ask me later, I might be open to that. But again, I'm enforcing my standard, which is like, if I want to connect with that person, every other connection is not connecting with that person. And so it's really about holding that aura closed rather than just opening up. And there's also another technique that I like to use to kind of cycle my energy out. It's basically normally when we breathe, our belly fills up with air, our belly expands. And then when we exhale, the belly contracts. And basically what you want to do is do the opposite of that. So when you inhale, your belly expands. I'm sorry, your belly inhales, your belly contracts. And then when you exhale, your belly expands. So you're doing this like quote unquote unnatural breathing sequence that for me just really grounds me back into my body and what's going on in my body. And I'll do this. I can usually hold the awareness of that breathing pattern for like 30 seconds to a minute. And just in that amount of time, I visualize kind of my aura kind of sealing up, and I'm wearing it like a suit of armor. And then anyone that comes up and talks to me or tries to talk to me, they usually get deflected and deterred off. It's actually a really interesting energetic exercise. And I don't necessarily say that's exclusive for reflectors alone. You can definitely, by bringing your awareness into your physical body and kind of wearing your energy like a suit of armor, can kind of deflect a lot of different things. So that's a great question though, Mac. And that's exactly why we do this, is because these are things that I'm doing in my day-to-day social life. I do this when I'm going into grocery stores, and even the simple act of positioning your feet. Like if you're talking to someone that you don't want to be talking to, put a foot out like this, and then put a foot out like this. And next thing you know, you're walking away from the person, right? So it's again, it's about direction of energy and where it's being focused. And as the controller of that direction, we get to decide how we set our sails so that regardless of the wind, we can move in the directions that we want to move into. So that was a whole lot for one question. But I think there's some
I
more.
will add.
Yeah,
I
add
will
some.
add kind of a technical note for with human design.
Yeah.
Checking in with your cognition can be helpful as well, I think, right? So you've got, your design Earth, Sun Earth, whatever that is for you. That's smell, tapping into your breathing through your nose. What are you picking up in terms of fragrances or pheromones from the other person? Tastes, actually breathing through your mouth to kind of sample the air with your mouth. Taste. So that's something I'm a bit of a mouth breather. Right, with the third tone, right? That's about outer vision. So really tapping into those visual cues of what you're picking up visually, or is the inner vision, which has to do with more of an internal kind of an interoception. So it's not about like looking out, but almost looking in to see how you feel there. The fifth is about feeling, right? So that has to do with like kind of an energetic feeling that you have in your body, or what you're picking up energetically from your environment. And six is touch, right? What are you picking up your actual tactile, physical sensations, in a handshake or.
Which makes total sense given that sometimes I get very uncomfortable with the long hug. I love long hugs. I don't want to say like I don't want to talk shit on the long. I love long hugs, but it's very important because I'm picking up so much information from that. That the person hugging me is someone that I actually have a lot of harmony with. And a lot of people, I would say in spiritual communities, they want to like synthesize these deep connections that maybe they're aurically there and spiritually there, but they're not necessarily physically there. A lot of people forget to check in that way. But I'm a touch cognition. So that's a huge thing in me is to like when people like will come up and hug me, I'll just grab them by the shoulders and I'll kind of like push them back and I'll be like, hey, what's up? I'll prematurely end the hug if I don't want to engage in it. And that not isn't necessarily, I think human design can be used to understand why that is, but at the end of the day, it's really like claiming sovereignty over your individual space is really at the end of the day what this comes down to is recognizing and re-recognizing and re-recognizing that like every moment we have a choice to align our software hardware with the reality or to choose something that's misaligned so that we can fit in better, usually is the case. But yeah, that's a really good point in terms of the cognition, because that for me to focus on the breathing and the actual like feeling my skin and that being my shield as opposed to like a smell or a taste cognition. And like for instance, I was thinking about sometimes when I do like use essential oils, I'll like do like peppermint essential oil and I'll rub it in my hands and I'll smell it. And so if you have a smell cognition or even a taste, because if you have medical grade essential oils, you can eat them or ingest them as well. But that might be like a nice little tool to have around with you when you want to amplify your standards and maintain your boundaries in a healthy way. That could be a really good tool to tote around, just as like a little guy in your pocket or in your holster if you have one. All right. So Nikki had a question about something on the Neutrino app. What is the significance of active versus dormant view? Prana, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, this is probably the second feature that Alexander adopted from me. Basically shows you which activations the data are in a defined center versus an undefined center. Right? An active gate is like a gate that's in an active defined center, and a dormant is in an undefined center. So being able to see that at a glance, in the column of data can be really helpful. So you don't have to look where it is and see, okay, is that part of definition or is it? Yeah, exactly. Like the dark one
Right.
is going to be showing, it's part of a definition in an active center, and the white ones are going to be showing, activations in open center.
Right. And so in terms of experience, these active gates we're a lot more likely to experience the qualities of these gates as opposed to the dormant ones, correct?
Yeah, they're like turned on all the time.
Right.
Where the dormant gates are kind of waiting for activation.
Waiting for the hookup. Awesome. That's a good question. I think we answered that at one point at another time because I was confused too. I was like, wait, what a second. How come all my stuff, I don't have them? And then makes sense now. So you say, Nixie is asking, how do you take on others' identities? It's an older question in the chat, but we were talking about that. How do you take on other people's? I'll jump on this one real quick. So, right, having the undefined G center, I'm kind of looking around constantly to see reflections of myself and to see what is being held together and who is holding it together. And one of the ways that I take on other people's identities is I insert myself into being like the nucleus of a situation rather than being invited to be the nucleus of a situation. Especially in social situations, like I'll have some kind of misalignment or judgment about something that's going on, and I'll want to be at the center. And then even when I'm outside of that group, I'll still be like problem solving, right? Undefined head, not self head type stuff. And so really what I find is like the G center is probably maybe debatable between the G and the undefined emotional center. Those are the deepest traps that I get trapped into, because once my G is running a sample out of not self from another person, so I'm like trying to be like, for instance, the PR manager for my buddy's personal brand or the videographer for this nonprofit that I made, without really having the resources and the invitations and the grace given to me, that sort of infects all my other centers and switches them all. Now I'm trying to solve their problems. Now I'm trying to be certain about it. Now I'm, saying stuff in the chat just to get attention. And, so it's one of the ways for me, at least, is it's just a very natural thing. Like I want to help people, and I believe that my reflections are helpful. And so one of the ways that I've kind of tamed that or brought that into alignment was really kind of adopting a projector strategy of waiting for an invitation and waiting to be asked for my help. And that had me sitting back with my arms crossed, judging a lot and having to deal with like, well, why am I even connected with these people if they're not going to ask my opinion? Not even in the slightest. And that, I would say, a couple of years ago was a really big theme for me, is taking on people's identities that hadn't asked me to take them on. And really, I had to recognize that it was simply my desire to be wanted and my desire to have a direction and have a role within their organization that really drove me to want to take that sample and like make it me.
Yeah, this has a lot to do with the undefined center, right? It's not so much an issue with the defined, because it has to do with consistency, right? People with defined G centers are, there's variations on it, but it's a feeling that you know who you are. There's certain consistency to that, where people with open or undefined G centers can feel. This has to do with like the not self themes of searching for love, right? That I love who I am around this person. Right? I feel like I'm a different person around these people. I like who I am, and the trap of always searching for that to validate I like who I am because of these people. That's the trap of trying to that, instead of looking to what is the consistency within your design. Define people. The G center can be great actors, right? Taking on different roles, identifying with different characteristics and character displays. There's a gift in there for sure, but it's not about because you feel insecure about how you feel about yourself, doesn't mean you need to rely on other people to solve that for you.
True that. I hope everyone could hear at least some of that because that was brilliant. Prana, can we try the your phone microphone? I think maybe let's see if that's better than the Bluetooth. But that was I love the contrast and bringing it back to like there's distortions within defined centers as well as undefined centers. They're just of a different nature in terms of the input output direction, right? So it's like if you have a defined center, you're designed to be outputting yourself, and sometimes that doesn't necessarily vibe with the group that you're in, and but you could suffocate the output so that you fit into the group, right? And with the undefined G, we're meant to receive that identity but not necessarily take it on. And you can take it on, but again, that's where like our not self start to emerge, and they start to call for. I like to see the not self. I compare it a lot to like the inner child of like wanting to be witnessed, and also comparing it to like an air conditioning unit, that the not self is just there to let you know that someone left the door open and it's messing with the temperature that you have set for the house. And so they're just again like little friendly reminders to that there's more alignment we can be brought into, which now is making me think of that legendary Steve Jobs moment where he took the very first iPhone, the only iPhone in existence, and he dropped it in a glass of water, and the bubbles started coming out of the iPhone. And he goes, "You see the bubbles coming out of there? That means there's air in this iPhone. So put more shit in it." And then that's what he told the developers. And that's what I kind of view the not self. It would be those little bubbles letting you know, like, hey, there's more of your vehicle that you could take advantage of. Or that you're using the hardware in a way that maybe is not compatible with the current software. So update the software. Yeah. Prana, can we get a little mic check here?
Yeah, sure. I switched something on my maybe that's not better.
Oh, that actually sounds worse for me now. How does it sound for everybody else? I mean, I think you're... Oh yeah, it's worse. It's way worse. I'm gonna peek through here, see if there's any more questions. Mac, you said your cognition is taste. So yeah, I would say have some essential oils, or maybe even some mints, or chew on some gum, something to remind you of the boundary between yourself and others. Loud in here about not being able to hear. Oh,
so I took off my headphones. Is that better, just with the native camera mic?
Yeah, I think that's way better for me. Yeah, there we go. Everyone's happy.
Right. Oh, the other thing I was going to say about taste, there can be a bit of a conflict between, relying on essential oils and, I guess, false sensory input.
I love where this is going.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
If you encounter someone who's wearing really strong cologne or perfume, you can't, absorb or intake their natural scent, right? There's part of this is a big thing with the tribe, right? The tribe is very scent oriented, and the tribe, similar people in your tribe smell the same because of what you eat, basically. And if you are distorting your sense of smell to give off a different impression of yourself, right, that there's kind of this masking or disguising of the natural way you are, where if your cognition is smell or taste, to be able to, I guess there's the difference between cleansing for yourself and being able to judge accurately what's coming from the other. You know what I mean?
That's a huge win right there that you caught that. Because that's something that I talk about a lot is, right, like my buddy Pasha, he's an emotional manifesting generator. And one of the first things that he does when he finds a girl he likes is he just starts smelling her, and he's really obvious about it. He'll be like, "What's that?" What's that smell? That's not natural. What is that smell? Why are you wearing that? What are you covering up? He's so funny, but he's just like an absolute savage with it. But yeah, that's a super important point of, right? Like, why am I having to cover up this smell in order to be here, right? Or why is it that I'm leaning on this crutch? And I think actually it's relevant because in my with my spiritual awakening, essential oils were some of the pieces that were like really helpful to me. But I eventually like outgrew them, and I wouldn't carry. I don't really carry crystals around in my pocket anymore, or you know, the high vibe stuff that we see. You can see it's very aesthetically there, but it doesn't always imply that there's an embodiment of the quality of you know, something that we would actually see as valuable. And sometimes it's masking it up. Like I know dudes and girls who wear and look 16 years ago when they fried their brain on acid. And you know, that's just my judgment that, you know, that person is not necessary just because they look a certain way or smell a certain way isn't necessarily how they actually be in their day-to-day lives. So very relevant, very important. And again, you know, it's like, you know, when you have to use a crutch, sometimes you have to use a crutch for a little bit. You don't confuse the crutch with a leg, right? So you want to strengthen your leg, not the reliance on the crutch. And there's a cool little thread here. Mac asked again, isn't being witnessed important for human beings generally? And I would say yes, to varying degrees. And being witnessed for what exactly? Like a lot of us have things that we want to be witnessed for and things that we don't want to be witnessed for. And sometimes the thing that we don't want to be witnessed for is actually our natural circuitry, right? Which is really interesting. Because it also works the other way. The things that we want to be genuinely want to be witnessed for, being our natural circuitry, that's kind of the lenses that we're looking to align, so that you can generate like a healthy desire to be witnessed naturally for who you are, and you can start to starve or compost this part of yourself that you know, doesn't want your natural self seen because of some consequence that usually happened in the past. And then Tricklight said, whenever she hears attention seeking, immediately they think connection seeking, which I think is kind of relevant in that sense. Like with the attention seeking behaviors kind of coming from the not self of the throat, right? One of the things that I always talk about in terms of addiction is like, it's not that you're addicted to the substances, you're addicted to the connection that the substance provides. And that, so it really is, that is what we want. And to be witnessed, I want to feel like people know my value, that people would invite me onto a rocket ship if the earth was going to explode and there was a rocket ship going to save, you know, the Noah's Ark. Is there a seat saved for me? And that has become so much more wildly relevant since, you know, Corona. And, you know, furthermore, what's going on is like the world is becoming more and more, how do you say, diverse and differentiated, and all the people are starting to find their tribes and their families. And so it's important, again, to be seen and be witnessed for your natural self, and to take accountability and honor the parts of yourself that it's like, well, this is the part I'm putting out because it gets a better response. And in terms of at least even like social media, Prana, you mentioned, it's like, this is much more authentic than what I was doing before in a way, because like, you know, my family's walking back and forth. I hear them when they're in the house. I can hear the chickens. This is just a scream right here. And so it's been vulnerable in being, you know, continuing to do my work like this. And it's also been super refreshing. I didn't realize how exciting and refreshing it was going to be. And I almost made a disappointed decision and like bought some kind of like basically run down old bus to like put my office in there to avoid being seen in this. And now I'm realizing it, like, oh my God, I'm being seen in this. This is actually not so bad. So that to be said, it's a long way of saying sometimes it's worse up here than it actually is in manifestation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's see. Quite curious about having the direction of the self gate to in an undefined G. So that would be the dormant second gate.
Right. So, this would have, if you got it'd be interesting to know, is this also part of your incarnation cross or not?
Mm.
But yeah, having an aspect in an undefined center, right, means that it's going to be there primarily, through the connections you make with other people, and is going to flavor the context of the the openness that you have, the sense that maybe looking for direction is a bigger impact from the not self for you, possibly because you're looking to activate that second gate. But trying to find that, finding the direction isn't necessarily about your direction. It might be more about the direction that empowers other people, or the the allies that you make, and the empowerment of their direction versus your own.
Yeah, I love that, honestly, because that's that in a distinction of who is this direction for, can be very confusing. And just because it's being shared, right, you might think it's for that other person, or if it's for yourself. But again, that's another layer of like awarenesses to be compared against the strategies, individuals' strategies and authorities, to find out what exactly is going on in there. It's like I have the two. I don't have the two, but I have the two now because of the transits, right? And so a lot of the times I'm looking at some of the visions that are coming through and the directions that are coming through, and some of them are really easy to recognize. Oh yeah, that's not necessarily my direction. Some of them are a lot harder. Some of them I want that to be my direction, but if I look at my reality, what's going on, like that's not my direction. And so it's important to note that you cannot walk in two directions at the same time, right? You can't walk north and south at the same time. And so picking one is really important. And the one thing that at least is becoming more apparent is the more often you pick your direction that actually is for you, right? The less often and more you can practice that, the less often you'll have to question it. And you can feel it in like Prana and myself, and people who have been in not only human design, but have, acquired knowledge and tested it and embodied it, is like, well, Prana, you want to walk west. I'm not going to tell you otherwise. I know I can't convince you otherwise, because you're going to follow your direction. And same with me. I might walk with you for a little bit just to see how it is. Right. But I know my direction might be in a different direction. And so, especially with the third line, making and breaking bonds, it can be challenging to break the bonds and challenging to separate paths from others. But, again, at the end of the day, these are the filters, and our authorities and strategies are meant to guide us into these pockets where we are more celebrated and encouraged and recognized, satisfied, peaceful, etc. And that we only get there by demonstrating the strategy and authority thing, which is like left foot, right foot, as I always put it.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, strategy and authority, it's all about tapping into the consistency that you have, right? Mm-hmm. What are the consistent things? And those are the things that are going to lead you to the experiences that they are going to be able to deal with, right? Making decisions from your openness and from your, the not self is, leads you into situations where your definition is not necessarily it doesn't have the capacity to handle, right? Where the decisions that your inner authority guide you towards, those are the things that they are prepared to handle, regardless of their difficulty or not.
That's I love that. One of the quotes that one of my teachers told me a long time ago was like, God's never going to give you anything you can't handle. And I I love that, because some things I don't think I can handle it, and I somehow find the strength to handle it. And then other things that I think I can handle, I really got to take a step back and be like, well, I got to humble myself. I cannot handle that. And so I love how you put that in terms of the strategy and the authority guiding you towards the things that not only you can handle, but that you may be the only person that can handle it. Right. I've been thinking about how many like close calls there have been in life, in terms of this person being born, that person saying hello, like little butterfly events. And really it's like a hyperfixation on like one single moment, and infusing an intention of it being special. But it's like every single moment can be like that. And the specialness for it is through our own, is perceived through our bodies, like our eyes and our smell and our touch. And so the fact that, I think a lot of people want to take themselves out of the equation. You can't really do that. Right? Like you can take a step back, but we still are very much so attached to these bodies. And so the way that we're going to experience things is going to be through the bodies, which is why human design is so helpful. Because again, it's like having the manual of like, oh, if your engine is making this noise, or if it's making that noise, like here's where to look for it under the hood. And you just got to put more fuel in, or you got to put more oil in, or change it out every month, I think that would be really fun. I just had that idea. One of my transit direction visions, naturally, to make like a user guide like they have for the cars, but make it look like a user, like an actual car manual,
Right.
but human design. And that may be specific for the types, or I don't know. Again, not necessarily what I'm going to attach to. But eventually I'd love for this, this community to just be one where it's like you could hear something that me or Prana says, and then someone comes back on the next AMA and be like, oh, I spent 15 hours on Canva and I created this thing. And we're like, oh my God, that's amazing. Let's sell it to everybody else and we'll split profits. Right. It's a fun way of creating together. Okay, so Sierra, well, there's two things I want to talk about. One is something about plastics. We're talking about the difference between natural and unnatural. Trick Light was bringing this up, being that so just the last thing is this is like man-made stuff is still natural. The collective hatred of it, we're talking about plastic, just amplifies what was originally discerned, like the rice experiment, only more amplified because it's already seen as terrible. So really, this conversation between natural and unnatural. And I'm projecting that there's a connection for you, Trick Light, between like natural being good and unnatural being bad, and a resistance towards using that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think it's definitely something worth noting, because I talk about natural versus normal a lot, and I prefer natural over what is normal, because for me at least, looking at human design, it's one of these things where it's like naturally this is our circuitry, this is the hardware we're given with. However we've normalized the use of this could be unnatural. However, it's like the discernment and me saying that's natural and that's unnatural, it's, for me at least, it's beyond good and bad. It's more like that's it and that's not it, right? Like that has a use case and that's functional and viable, and that unnatural thing is just not viable. And there's certain situations where it may appear that it's like good or bad, and for me at least, I am, I'm looking at things through the very practical lens, what's going to be helpful for people. And sometimes what is natural is very quote unquote bad for people, given their current situation, given the current lives that they've built. What's normal is much more suitable for that, but maybe they're not happy there. And so shifting to, again, what is natural, what has context too, is like, you think about like an invasive species on an island that we have all this, like, for instance, there's some growing right outside here. The albizia is a very invasive species. It like really is not great for the soil. It grows for 20 years really tall, then it falls over, and there's these massive things. And it doesn't have a context. It doesn't necessarily operate in harmony with the rest of the ecosystem. Now, to a degree, that makes it unnatural for it to be here, but it still works off sunlight and rainwater and all this stuff. It still has a level of natural energy. However, it's lacking context, and it's lacking years of being in connection with the endemic species, the natural species here. And so that's one of the distinctions that I want to make, because it's like, even like plastics, like those are, you're right, they are unnaturally natural. Like, they're made from components that are considered natural, but we consider them unnatural. And so looking at just bringing this concept into the idea of like, it's a spectrum, right, of quote unquote natural, just how you found it, versus the refinement processes that go along the way. Because I was speaking on this earlier about conditioning. Like, we're just going from whatever conditioning we had to a conditioning that we think is more suitable, right? And that we would consider like more ourselves, but it is another conditioning, because we can't operate outside of our mind's limitations and paradigms. We just have to continuously update it. So we're going from an outdated conditioning, one that may seem normal but not necessarily as natural as this new conditioning. But I just wanted to bring that into it, because there was a couple threads going back into it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you can talk about mechanics this way as well with human design, right? It's a mechanical issue. It's not moral. It's like saying, you've got a car that takes gasoline and you've been putting diesel in it all this time, right? Nothing wrong with that. I mean, it may not work as well as it should, but it's not about good or bad. It's just about what's the mechanical design here,
right? Yeah, right. Like, and my buddy Kale puts it really good. He goes, "There is no good or bad. There's possibilities and there's consequences, which are really the same thing, right? It's just like, there's a cause and then there's an effect. And if you want this effect, but you allowed this cause to manifest, or you manifested this cause, you have to take accountability for that, right? Of like, okay, that was the effect. What caused it? Okay, I'm not going to do that again, because that causes this effect, and I don't want that effect in my life anymore. Which, that kind of brought me back to a horror moment when my brother called me up. I let him borrow my van, which is a diesel engine, which if you put gasoline in a diesel engine, that is like, the effect of that is like blowing up the engine. It just get like bubbles up, and it's not desirable by any means. And my brother played a prank on me. He's like, "Hey bro, your van is gas, right? Because I just put like a whole tank of gas in it, and now it's starting to act funny." And I was like, "You did not. You're my blood brother, bro. You did not put gas in my diesel engine." And he's like, nah, I'm just kidding. But my heart, for a second, I was like, oh my God, you just committed a cardinal sin in my eyes. But anyway, it's pretty funny. But that the concept of mechanics and preserving the mechanics I think is very important. And if we are to label something, I would label that as a good thing, right? Even though we're talking about good and bad don't exist, but someone that wants to preserve their mechanics and is looking to find natural remedies to their quote unquote problems or the issues and challenges that they're facing, that is more likely someone that I want to connect with, as opposed to somebody who is, destroying their liver with alcohol and, diminishing their sexual energy by being overly promiscuous, or, stifling their creativity by, for whatever reason, however it is, looking at like the way that someone takes care of the things that are important to them and the way that they treat their enemies those are two metrics that I like to use in terms of, gauging and judging my own interaction with somebody. And the enemy things is actually really interesting, because it's like, you never know when you might end up somebody's enemy. So, especially as a fifth line, if I have like really good friends, it's really interesting for me to see how my friends treat people that they might judge are lesser than them or might treat as their enemies. Because if I'm going to be on that one side, it's okay if we're enemies, but there's a certain level of respect that enemies ought to have for each other, that I believe is there. And I believe that because I watch so much anime, and there's always this like you let the dude power up. You let him power up to his max potential because I want to power up to my max potential. And if I fight you and I interrupt your level up, I'm not going to get to fight you at your full potential. I will have won the battle maybe, but I will never have been able to experience myself at max power. And that's kind of one of the excitements of life, is to have adversities and challenges that ask you to level up in these ways. So let's go back in here. Someone was asking about the sixth line. Yeah. Sierra says they were asking about like the first part. Could you briefly speak on the sixth line going through their first Saturn return? Mine hit back in March, and the intensity continues. I'm patient but also curious. That was Moksha earlier, like 20 minutes ago. But I saw some sixes in there, so.
Right. So the sixth line process it's divided up between the first phase, which every sixth line in your chart, regardless of whether it's profile or just another activation, will go through a third line phase, basically up until your Saturn return. And from there, there's sort of a retreating to, they call it going up on the roof, which is about, being a bit more aloof and reflective about that third line experience, and that usually takes you from the Saturn return to the Chiron return, so kind of between 30 and 50, and then after that is when they call it coming off the roof, which is kind of a reemergence, to step into your role as a role model, with the wisdom and knowledge that you've derived from your experience and your reflection on it. So it's important that in that initial phase of your life that you're allowed to make mistakes. There can be it can be honestly very brutal, because especially if you're not a third line, like if you're a 6-2 or a 4-6, that can be particularly hard because there's an inherent adaptability to the third line, to be able to adapt to the trial and error and to persist and to keep going, where the sixth line can often feel just broken by it. There's a lot of sixth lines that die around 30. So to get through your Saturn return is an accomplishment as a sixth line being, and you've earned that time to step back and reflect and see what lessons you've learned. And this has to do a lot with our transition to this Uranian form of 84-year bodies, that we've never really been able to embody this kind of incarnation until the last few hundred years. So we don't really know what these role models are meant to be, right? Most people died around between 30 to 50. The rare person would live beyond then, but so we only know about that initial phase, and then the on the roof, aloof, fool on the hill that the retreating part is about. But it's going to take these sixth line beings coming into their true form, their true to be authentic role models of themselves, stepping in to share the wisdom that they have after that age of 50, which is when your incarnation cross really flowers. And it's going to take people that are in this process to do that. We can't really say what that looks like for anyone. Anything you got to say about that?
I mean, it's beautiful as always. I like the flower example. because flowers, when they're pollinated, turn into fruit, and then fruit creates more plants to then be seeded to flower and fruit, and then create more. And it's it's a cycle that I love how you put it. Uranian. It's not something that we've been really doing for a long time in terms of living this long, right? And there's so many different new things that we've never seen before as a species, like toddlers growing up with access to the smartphones, right? And so in a lot of ways, I like to view it as like, we have no idea what's going on, but what we do know is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so it's and I think it's an important balancing act to do between the traditions and the fundamentals and the foundations of our physical universe, constantly being updated by the mutations that occur as the universe continues to age and the expansion continues to happen. And so one of the things that I've looked at with some of my friends, because we are all in the same timeline, is like I'm 30, my buddy Kai is 30, my buddy Shaolin Luke is 27, and there's this maturing that I'm noticing happening naturally, and I'm watching everyone handle it differently. Like my buddy Kai is spending a lot more time with himself and his partner. Shaolin Luke is spending a lot more time like being active in the community, and he's a 2-4. And even though we're not necessarily have 6 lines, there is still this this first phase of life, the pre-Saturn return era, where so much of it is just figuring out who it is that we are by figuring out who we're not. And I think one of the things, the intensity on the roof can increase dramatically. Like you said, not a lot of people thought of 6 lines don't make it through their Saturn return, is right, because there's a lot of things that having to take accountability for certain things, having to take responsibility for certain things, lost connections, missed opportunities, and stuff like that. That can be really heavy, right? Really heavy. And the question of what am I supposed to do with this, not really even emerging for maybe another decade or two. It kind of puts you in it tests you. Are you actually ready to be a role model? Because the biggest thing that the role model can teach us is, right, prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and follow your strategy and authority. That's the ancient text they discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls, said something along the lines of that. But right, because that's we're still in the experiment. We can never neglect the fact that there's always going to be new elements emerging out of the experiment that we're conducting. So there's a lot of grief feeling this. Someone was talking about they had lost a cousin, and just want to send some blessings out to. February 18th was the day of my brother's funeral memorial service. He passed January 11th at 24 years old, and was the one who introduced you to human design, Sierra. Oh, that's sweet. Well, sending some prayers up for your brother. I'm sure he's stoked that you're in here and learning more about it, because it must have been important to him if he introduced it to you. So, thank you for sharing that. It was really vulnerable as well. Very moving. And but that's at least for me, in terms of role models, what I like to see, and the people that I choose between role models, again, is like, how much of a student is this person, and how receptive are they to true human emotions? Because a lot of people, myself included, have this projection of a role model, that the role model already knows everything, and that they're here because they're in the role model position because they know everything. But my greatest teachers are the ones who consider themselves students. I'm a student of music. I'm a student of human design. And because of that studiousness and that desire to learn, and that really love affair with learning, that to me is the thing that's most valuable, because I've been in the teacher situation and having my teacher pants on, and it's not as good for me as when I'm just a student and I'm learning. There's this ego that kind of comes in, that wants to compare itself to every other, Instagram influencer that has long hair and a goatee, right? And now is a dad. And so it's really important for me to remember that the sixth line, part of being a role model is role modeling how to be a student again, just as much as it is like being a teacher and bringing the teachings through. Yeah, 6'3" here, just turned 49. Sometimes I question if I'm coming or going. Like coming or going on the roof. As if it's wait, so okay, so coming off the roof, can they get back on the roof?
Well, it's more just a matter of kind of retreat and withdrawal,
Right.
right? If someone's a 6'2", right, there's always going to be a kind of a reclusive side to them.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is the coming off the roof has a lot to do with outer authority, right?
Mm.
That we're all here to share our unique perspective and the things we've learned through our awareness. And for most people, that's just a rehashed repeating of things they've heard and learned. Where the sixth line beings, when they can be patient and go through their process, there's unique things that are going to come out of them in particular that that you're not going to see in other people. But it takes being authentic and loving yourself and and trusting your process.
I can never get that image out of my head of like the guy drowning and then being like, I'm new to human design, help, and it just gives him a high five. It's his strategy and authority. But one of the things I love about that so much is that, right, like I feel like so much information, and even in the transits today, that the Mars in detriment says the delusion that knowledge is power, because knowledge alone is not power. Potential, yes, maybe, but knowledge alone is not the same thing as power. To me, power is not something you can give away, or it's something that is inherent to our being, and the power is always in the present. The power is in the now, and the ability to navigate appropriately, which is again strategy and authority, left foot, right foot, sails and wind, right? And so being able to have a competent, it doesn't even have to be mastery, but having competency with the strategy and authority. And I also like to, how you say, not necessarily humble people, but sometimes people ask me questions about human design that are way beyond their scope, and they haven't even grasped strategy and authority. And I have to reground them into it, because really for me, I could just flex and be like, yeah, I know all this stuff about cognition and variables and, different types of emotional ways and stuff. But you don't even know how to respond. Every time I ask you a question, you're like, yeah, I think blah, blah, blah. And you just start talking. You've yet to give me one single uh-huh or uh-uh, right? You're resistant to that. And so with that, it can be seen as dogmatic, but ultimately I'm not going to teach a baby how to use a sword if she keeps hitting herself in the head with one of her toys. I'm not going to put a sword in her hand. And same but different. But so important to acknowledge like how vitally important the strategy and authority are in here. There's more beyond the duality of yes and no, right? Yeah, there's the spectrum, and yes and no exist, right? Moksha says, thank you, Prana. Seems that was really helpful for Moksha with the talk about the 6-line stuff, which that might be another one of my favorite things about human design is how much like relief it offers to people going through stuff, because not only is human design really accurate, right, but it's relatable, and on like an oddly how you say, such a wide scale for different types of people. That's how I guess there's truth in it, is if many people from different backgrounds and experiences can all agree, like, this is a good song. I don't know what they're saying, but this is a good song. It must be a good song, huh?
Mm.
Moksha feels feelings and relaxation. I love how you spoke in the third person, Moksha. I do that sometimes. It's helpful. It's helpful. I love it. Well, Prana, do you have anything else that you want to dive into?
I don't know.
Anyone else got any more questions? We're coming up on an hour and 5 minutes here, so I just wanted to check in with your energy. Still got gas or diesel
Yeah.
in you?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still good for now. I
Okay.
was going to say also that image of the person drowning with their hand out, that's also a matter of a perspective shift for them, right?
Right.
Their perspective may be that they're drowning, and they just don't realize the tools that they have, right? Where they drowning may not be a necessity, right?
Mm-hmm.
The person giving them a high five sees, oh yeah, you've got these flippers with you. What's the big deal? Just
Right.
just
Or like
respond, right? Just
stand up. You're in
right. Or
shallow
stand up.
water.
Exactly. Yeah,
Just
you're in
stand
shallow
up.
water.
Oh, I love it.
Totally.
Yeah. And yeah. That's a good one. There's a whole course designed around that right there. Sierra just
Yes. Yeah.
posted. Yeah, exactly. Just enough to not die, but also just enough to be in a state of crisis, right? Or a state of needing help, right? Love it.
Mm-hmm.
HD to me feels as a sort of mirror. I feel like I can relate to all the different types. It's like a 24-volt DC battery, negative positive systems going through the transformated AC system where there's active, neutral, and earth grounding. See any of us as babies limits the tech. I'd rather see us all as knowledgeable. We wouldn't be on Earth if we weren't. I don't really know what that's related to. But I think I'm just, this is Tiana, I think I'm just in tune with the transits. Shrug. Yeah, I mean, Tiana was saying that they feel like they can relate to all the different types. What do you have to say to that?
Sorry, I was reading one of the texts. What did you say?
No worries. I was asking. Tiana says, "I feel like I can relate to all of the different types," and then says, "I think I'm just in tune with the transits." Shrug. Uh, and she's a what is this? Man-gen? No, generator, emotional generator.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean that's. I think that's the common experience for manifesting generators. In that they can take on so many roles. Usually, there's a variety of different definitions within them. From projector channels to manifestor channels to generator channels, right? There could be a mix of a variety of different activations in there. So hearing the descriptions of each, they can kind of identify with those things for sure. But to realize that it all comes together in a synthesis of your one design, right? Right, having a projector channel is not the same as being a projector. If you're a manifesting generator, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. That was a trip for me when I learned that too. It was like, what is a projecting channel versus a generating versus a manifested channel? And that does explain a lot. And so that would be a good thing to look at. Tiana's what other types of channels do you have access to? And again, maybe what channels are you putting a lot of emphasis on right now because of the transits? What channels are being you say highlighted because of the emotional wave is something to think about as well. But again, there's levels to it. Levels. So what tools would you equip them with to help them shift that perspective? Because sometimes that feels impossible, and it is in some designs for that kind of crisis to catalyze their growth. True, definitely true, Ronan. Like this is the person who's like sitting here in the water, right? Is this gate 36 right here? And then they go out and tell their friends, I almost drowned. That's gate 35. Which
This is gate
again is like,
29.
what's that?
This looks like gate 29 to me.
How
The
so?
abyss.
Oh, okay. Love
It's
that.
saying yes. The tools, right? I think for me, it has a lot to do with embodying it yourself, right? Can you be a role model? Can you set an example? You can't just go around preaching and telling everybody what to do, right? But if people recognize there's a shift in you, in your frequency, right, that can lead to a lot of things, right? If you can kind of be with someone and help them understand that you can kind of be with them in that process, in that crisis, but the panic is not the same in you as they feel in them. They can recognize there's something different about this person, and that might lead
Right.
them to asking.
Right.
But
I would envision like sitting next to this person, right? And just like sticking your head up out of the water with them and like being in it with them, but being in a more calm state is what you're saying. That will they will feel that, and it might cause some introspection to be like, wait a second, am I really drowning right now? I can actually this person seems calm and fine. And that's, as you're mentioning, is like part of the role model's job is to have gone through those first 30 years and survived ultimately. And that sometimes again is in a feat itself. Like there's people who survived the Holocaust and people who survived different kinds of purges throughout our history, and just to have survived and to continue living when it would seem as though there's nothing worth living for. Maybe your whole family was ended line, and like that is powerful in and of itself. So what tools would I equip them with to shift the perspective? Really the perspective would be the tool in and of itself, right? Like the level of awareness, the experience of like being in it with them. If that's something that is right for me to do, I will do that. And that's something that I actually have done quite a bit in terms of some of the retreats that I've helped lead here in Maui and on the mainland. Is like, a lot of these dudes that have traumas from years and years ago that are really negatively impacting their lives. A lot of the times they just need someone to sit in the water with them with their face up, like just barely breathing air, enough for them to realize like, okay, this is something that's in the past and I'm somewhere different now. And like, I can still experience that and have experienced that, but it doesn't necessarily have to, again, influence my decisions and dictate my decisions, which, again, is if you're using that blanket strategy and authority thing, again, that is like one of the most, strategy and authority is like a crowbar, right? You can use it as a hammer. You can pull nails up with it. You can pull things apart. You can stick things together. Kind of, it's like such a versatile tool. There's my baby.
I mean, and to say all that doesn't invalidate their experience of feeling like they're in crisis, right? Even when you're following your design, you're going to meet crisis, right? You're going to go through painful and devastating situations, and again, that comes to once you understand and trust that this vehicle is kind of guiding you somewhere. There can be sort of this relaxation as a passenger riding in this vehicle at the same time of still experiencing these things, that you can trust the process even though you're in the midst of crisis.
Right. Yeah. And for it to like acceptance as a tool as well, in that, like, I want to tie these two things together because Tricklight said, in relation to calling people babies in human design for accessing information beyond yes and no. And then Tricklight also mentioned, seeing any of us as babies limits the tech. And I want to challenge that, because if I have a light bulb that can only handle 10 volts of electricity, That's different than a light bulb that can handle 100,000 volts. If I try and put 100,000 volts of electricity through that light bulb, I'm not limiting the tech. I will actually destroy the tech if I try and put too much energy into it. And so, yes, things are beyond yes and no. But regarding this like tech analogy, like tech has limitations. Physical bodies have limitations, and that's why I think this image is really helpful in the sense of acceptance, because sometimes, the only way to move forward is to spend a little bit of time in that crisis and accept, hey, I want help. Maybe this is someone that has trouble asking for help because people always say no. But spending a month or two in the crisis like this might actually inspire them to take, to take initiative and ask for help, right? And so same thing with the the babies and light bulb. Like, I do sometimes call people babies, and I also call babies babies, right? It's like someone just picked up the handpan for a first time. They're a baby. They can't conceptualize 3-4 patterns. They're still learning how to hit the object. And so again, awareness of like, what are the actual limitations that are imposed on this person? And rather than, and I get the concept of holding them in their highest and best, and not pigeonholing them to you're going to be a baby forever, because that's not what my intention is to do. But a lot of people want to get on to steps 53, 54, 55, but they've yet to handle and really understand and embody steps 1, 2, and 3, which is, again, like there's a learning curve with this. And the entry point is very simple, right? Strategy and authority. And same thing with music. There's 12 notes, right? But within each of those notes, there's 12 scales. And with each and 12 of those scales, there's a minor and a major scale, and there's a diminished scale. And it gets very complicated very quick because you have a lot of moving parts that can shift in and out. And so let's see what Ronan has to say here. Since everyone is different, not everyone can simply stand. So what do you equip them with then? When do you get them comfortable enough to the water that they won't feel like they're drowning? You help them get their floaties and the confidence to stand. Okay, so we kind of already answered that. But one thing that just came to mind now, actually, as you're saying that, is I feel like there's definitely, personally, I've experienced the desire to like reach in and grab the person and pull them out. Right. And this would be equivalent to like giving a man a fish, as opposed to being able to sit next to them and not judge them like they're judging themselves, not help them necessarily directly, like maybe they want to be helped. Like maybe this is someone who's doing this because normally people will come along and pull them out of the water, and they've built up this conditioning that, oh, someone's just going to save me so I can be reckless, right? But it's not necessarily the way. And so one of my, I would say the pillars that I operate on is like neutral jing. Like when I come into a situation, I know just by observing it, I'm altering it. But how can I be intentional with not altering the situation so much? Like not coming in and being the hero, not coming in and being the savior, and just yanking the person out. And then also considering like sometimes my strategy and authority has taken me out of the room when something like this is going on. Because it's also like, just because someone is, in a state of crisis, or they're putting themselves in a state of crisis, doesn't mean that you have to go sit with them in that state of crisis, right? Like if you have capacity and your SNA tells you do that, cool, do that. If your SNA tells you don't do that, don't do that. And definitely don't do it because you think it makes you a good person. Because a lot of people get caught in these codependent relationships, narcissist and victim, which again, those are just labels. But it's really two people that are like basically trying to exist on the validation of the external world alone. And most of the time, they're totally ignoring the internal authority and what's actually going on for their physical bodies. Who's these? Oh, that's right. They're doing a survey here. The reason I had to tear down I'm like, who is this in my yard? they're doing a survey here to make sure that there's no more hut. Which there's no more hut. Did you see it? It's not there anymore.
Ori has a question here. I'm gonna read his.
Yeah. Please. Oh, the chat has moved on.
Ori says he has a question. I don't hear a lot
Okay.
of people talk and expand more about the planet's meaning in human design. What's your point of view on the difference between the different planets and design planets and personality planets? Like, for example, I'm curious to know what would be the explanation on my personality Venus 36.6 and my design Venus 5.1. Yeah, so there's like the general understanding of what the planets mean, which has to do, Venus would be like your values, right? What are the things that you value? When you get into more advanced things like looking at the planetary squares, the magic square, there's sort of this new keynoting that takes the values of the planets and places them a little bit differently. Where we'll talk about Venus, I guess. So Venus on the design side, it has the keynote of complexion, which has a lot to do with like your skin tone, the way your skin looks, right? This is kind of a visual, having a design, five, but there's something about pattern to your complexion. Yeah, this is something that people are going to spend years studying in terms of what the design side and the personality, like the design sides, the advanced studies here is called PHS, Primary Health System, and looking at the things like the resonance to the color of your design sun earth and your design nodes. So having a design Venus that resonates with its color to your sun earth means there's going to be some sort of connection there between your complexion and how you're eating, for example, your dietary regimen. On the personality side, right, that's the brave psychology, it's called, and Venus here is about your standard. So this is kind of like your what your standard for the values that you embody with your mind, right? What are your standards, right? So having your standards in 36.6, that says a lot about the wisdom that can be gained from crisis, right? There's a certain standard to how your mind is going to express itself with that. So there's it's a huge area of study that's going to take years for people to really explore. But there are different keynotes for the design side versus the personality side. Typically, it's the design side is going to be about the body, about the form, and the personality side is about the mind and the way you express your unique outer authority.
Yep. Definitely just learned some new stuff there. I love that the Venus is traditionally viewed as the planet that rules like love and romance and all that, and here it's values, which is like a total maturing of love and romance in the sense that the psychology of like how I pick a partner. I'm actually going to look at mine right now, so I think that has a huge role to play in it. 51.6. Well, the shock and arousing. Yep, makes sense. I got like this beautiful, edgy, kind of like elven princess character, and she's great. I love her so much. Let's see. Ooh. What do we got here? Question for Prana and his 3 channels coming out of the solar plexus. Are you able to differentiate which wave you're experiencing, and has it been beneficial? Great question.
Still don't know. I don't know.
Is it easier to like reflect on them? Like could you reflect on it and that's
for sure
there, but in the moment it's like
Yeah. I mean, for me, all my activations in my solar plexus are undefined, which means it has more to do with my body, right? The feelings and this is coming from the root, so there's a lot of adrenalized pressure. So I have a good sense of the pressure that I'm feeling in my body, the kind of the urgency of having to feel like I need to do something or take action, or the like there's a rising wave of desire that I need to do something. But to differentiate between tribal and collective and individual, it's a melting pot, right? It's a synthesis, right? So the trust that my body makes decisions based on cycles, emotional cycles. That there's I can be okay with not knowing what I'm feeling right now, because I know that it's a process, right? And to trust that my emotions are going through a process, and not to get stuck on making a decision right now based on how I'm feeling. That's the most beneficial thing. And trusting that, right? I explained, emotional authority is kind of like, triangulating a position, right? You experience something once, and that's only one location, right? To triangulate a location of, like, you think of like someone trying to, they got someone on the telephone and they're trying to find their location, and you got to wait a certain amount of time or ping them between different cell towers, right? To find them, you need 3 different perspectives, right? So to experience something once, that's only one perspective, and the challenge and the experiment is to gently push it away at that time, right? To see what's going to come back, and what does come back, and when it does come back, if it does come back, then you've got another time, another ping in your triangulation of clarity, that even then, right, that there's no location yet. That you got 2 perspectives, and they could be different. It's not till you've really experienced something a third time that you start to get kind of a vague sense of the location of that clarity. Again, the longer you can take, the better the clarity becomes. But it's a challenge every day, even for me. That I've known this for how long? 20, 25 years. It's still hard to wait when I feel that rising motor wave to jump on something. So you never get over it, but you get the feeling of trust that as you go through that process, you trust that it's going to lead you in the right direction. Yeah.
That was awesome. I love one thing that I thought about is, right, this kind of like addiction to wanting to know, and it's like, what happens when you know, right? Like if you could suddenly, and maybe it is different for you because all of your all these gates in your solar plexus are in your design side, and if it were in the personality side, it might be a little bit different with someone who has had as much experience as you've had. And the element of surrender, like I love how you opened up with that. You're like, nope, still mystery to me, because that's like, I'm like, yes, that's, you could reflect on it, duh, but like in the moment, like that's kind of like the whole point of the emotions, is to be this thing that's kind of beyond our mechanics, and the best mechanical advice that we can give is to, right, like, don't use it right now. It's not teed up, it's not warmed up. Like if you do that with a car too much, right, it corrodes the engine, and it destroys the transmission. And if you don't let the engine warm up like you have to do with the emotional energy, then, and I remember you said something a long time ago about, not that long, like a month or a couple months ago, about like disengaging emotional awareness from emotional energy. And I use that a lot when I talk about the emotions, because, you know, realizing that's something that I do is I'm looking to exhaust this emotional energy without making a decision. And a lot of the times that emotional energy is pressurized by the root, right? Or pressurized by the head, in terms of like, I think action needs to be taken place versus I feel the urgency of action needing to take place. And, you know, naturally in my chart, there's like none of that really that's pressurized in terms of the emotions. And so there's that like social conditioning that provides a lot of pressure and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good question, Salamander. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
The difference is the trust in the process, right? Even when it doesn't feel good. Yeah, exactly. Because when we know we can just play and create, why do we keep designing systems that are susceptible to corrosion and failure? Because we are susceptible to corrosion and failure, and that's all we can do. Fortunately. It's like, I remember when I first started learning about the trivium, which is the kind of thing that like broke me out of my cycle in college, was learning about this education system that it only taught three things. It only taught receiving information, logicking out impossibilities is the second thing, and then expressing information as the third thing. Because one of the, like, for instance, computers, we have ways for the computer to receive information, logic out impossibilities, and then express with the screen, right? And so that's part of you know, maybe even answering the question that Tricklight's bringing up. She says, no thanks, rewriting that limiting story into a future world. Perpetual motion. Okay. There's limits. Limits exist. Awareness of the limits is important, and that's one thing that, you know, I was talking about the trivium in terms of education. Like, how we learn and the process of learning is more important than what we're actually learning in the long run. Because if you know how to learn, well, then you can unlearn anything and relearn something else based off of you know, a situation, like probably an emotional lens of a current situation versus a different emotional lens of another situation, which is why it's important to have multiple emotional lenses, allowing all of them to, like you said, like, to triangulate, so that way it can you can actually have some clarity over time and not confine the emotions to some kind of as Stricklight would put it, a limited and susceptible to corruption. It's like a process that is constantly evolving. Everyone's emotional process is constantly evolving based off what's being put into it. But there is a process that your body will process it the same way every time. Like, for instance, digestion. You put something in your mouth, it goes down your esophagus, falls into your stomach, moves into digestion, then it gets separated into, you know, small intestine, large intestine, then it moves through you, then it comes out. Happens the same way every single time. Now, depending on what you put in, there might be different little nuances and chemical reactions, but the process is generally the same. That's how life is actually grows, is by having limited systems that happen in a very congruent, cyclical way. So I'm sensing a little bit of like, or a lot maybe, of like resistance to systems and limitations from you, Tricklight. And it's welcome here. I'm just going to challenge it, because so much of life depends on systems and limitations. And for me, there is no transcending the limitations. You can rewrite the frameworks and the stories around it, but like, you can't transcend digestion or walking and running and throwing. And not saying he
Well-
can't transcend human design. Go ahead, Prana, but there is that.
Go to gate 60 and read the subheading under gate 60.
Go to gate 60 in the rave.
Yeah.
Manal?
Rave
Okay.
Jing.
The acceptance of limitation is the first step in transcendence. Ooh. Well said. You're the best at that, bro. You're the keynoting rogue king. Love it.
All right. Well, I got to run here.
All right.
About the end
Sounds
of my
good,
time.
man. This was awesome. I might hang out for a little bit longer.
Sure.
But this was great. Thank you so much for joining us again, bro. I really appreciate it. Your time is really valuable to me. And so it's awesome when we get to spend time together and riff on these things. I will see you in the flow, my brother.
Definitely. My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Aloha, Prana. God, Prana is just such a badass. I love that dude so much. I found him actually. Someone introduced me to neutrino design through this Discord, and I found Prana through neutrino design because his Facebook was linked to it, and he has a huge group on Facebook, which is really interesting because when we started working a little bit closer together, I invited him to Discord just to invite him. But I didn't necessarily have any expectations. I was like, he's probably already got a Facebook page, and now he's here doing AMAs with us. And again, someone who is responding and doing the things that light them up. I could have projected, and I did project, that he wouldn't want to come onto the Discord because he's already got a Facebook group, and just the energy within our Discord was enough for him to respond in a way where he's now a moderator and he's a pretty key component of the Eevolvee server here. So yeah, we just got a lot of love for him. And shout out to the OGs, Ronan and Ori, and Chris was in here a little bit earlier, who were the first wave of moderators that I brought on to continue to cultivate this space for human design and a handful of the other things. And then of course Life Force, who we added, I think it was probably like a month or maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago. Just the way this is building, I've been following my strategy and authority almost to a T regarding, using that 28-day cycle, and which is very similar. I think the emotional wave and the lunar wave are similar in the sense that, while the lunar wave has like a fixed timeline, 28 days, the emotional wave has a less fixed timeline. But the concept of patience and the concept of the willingness to again trust the process, that is again, I think it's lessons for all human beings, emotions, and the moon is like, trust the process. There are some things that you have to trust. You can't go into it knowing, because if you go into it knowing, it changes the result, right? And I think actually, where was that? That was today a little bit as well. Yep. Line 2, gate 2, a natural gift for the unlearnable knowing, which is there's part of the instinct. Unlearnable knowing is instinct. I just clicked. Being that, I can't teach you that when there's a fire, you run away from it, or you don't have to learn that, right? But you know that when there's a fire in front of you and it's endangering you, you run away from it, right? Or a tiger that's endangering you, you run away from it, right? And so there's that unlearnable knowing emerging in that second line there. So yeah, he's a font of wisdom. Do you mean like font, like he has his own text? That's hilarious if that's what you mean, because he's totally a font of wisdom. Trust in the unknown, as I found, fundamental to patience. Yeah, right? It's like, it's the mother of patience is the unknown, and the father would be maybe stillness, maybe distraction, maybe there could be many fathers, but fount. I was thinking that you meant fountain as well, but the font is hilarious. Like if Prana were a font, what kind of font would he be? He'd be a pretty cool font, I think. But he definitely is a fountain, which I'm actually going to be building a fountain here at the Halle in probably a couple days. Definitely not papyrus. Thank you guys for remembering all these inside jokes. I love it. I love it. Well, it's been about 3 hours on the good old screen here, so I'm about to close this down. Thank you guys for participating in yet another one of our AMAs. Go ahead and check out the Gates' channels, or characters as Gates, which you can like put a GIF in there of your who you think embody the transits really well. Fount of all wisdom. Oh, fount in this context is more like a reservoir, the baptismal font. So the original expression was font of all wisdom. I love it. I use that fountain a lot to describe kind of my connection to the divine. Survival mechanisms of the body are currently evolving across multiple timelines. It only takes as long as we choose to take a new body font. Okay. All right. Life Force is saying the recording is up from earlier today. So if you want to know more about that, or you missed the AMA with the people at the Rave Festival 2024, which Life Force is going to be speaking at that, which is really exciting. And so that's there. And then, of course, if you want to join the Live Your Design course with me and Ryan, we're going to be kicking that off January 22nd, which is the new year, the Rave New Year. And we give you guys here on Discord a special discount. It's about $100 off of the price that everyone else is going to see just for being a part of the Discord. And so this is going to be a really fun one. Live Your Design is all about, well, you can read about it on the page, but it's really all about understanding the 9 centers and how the not self and the conditioning is going to emerge uniquely in your life. And this is going to be, it's probably not going to go, we're not going to let it go over 20 or 30 people. So it'll be intimate enough that you can ask questions and etc. But me and Ryan are both really excited to be sharing that. And also, if you run into any problems, I am a third line. I did create this website and this funnel and everything. So if you run into any problems purchasing, feel free to direct message me. Oh, and one more thing. For our VIP members, the Eevolvee members, the subscriptions to this Discord, you're getting an extra $100 discount on top of that. The link for that is in the at the top of the server. You go to the server shop and you can buy a server subscription here. We have a $5 one and a $20 one, and that again just goes back to making this server awesome. And that also gets you access to the other link where there's an extra $100 off on top of the already $100 off. So that gets you the course for $200 instead of $300 here. Or if you're not in the Discord, it's $400. So a lot of numbers, but of course you guys are used to that because we're here in Human Design. So anyway, love you guys. Catch you later. Be well. Peace.